Hey y'all, I'm Karen Mayer Cunningham, the special education boss. If you've ever felt confused, overwhelmed, or just plain frustrated at the 504 IEP table, you are in the right place. Every week, I'm breaking down the rules, the rights, and the realities of special education so you can walk into meetings informed, empowered, and ready to make real change. And whether you're a parent, a teacher, an advocate, a school-based member, or somebody who's just trying to do right by a student, this podcast gives you straight talk, real answers, and tools that you can use immediately. I'm not here to play politics. I'm not here to play sides. I'm here to train people who sit at the table and teach you how to follow the law, ask the right questions, and protect the rights of students. So go ahead and hit subscribe, share this with a friend, and you know what? Meet me back here every single week. We're not just talking about change. We're making it. Because when you know better, you do better. And when we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody. Good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you guys for being here. We're so excited to train you guys on getting your child fully tested for special education. It's so important that we get our kids tested when then there's an area of a suspected need and that we get them tested fully. And so if we haven't met, I'm Karen Mayer Cunningham, special education boss, training everyone who sits at the 504 IEP table to navigate and negotiate successful student outcomes. And so special education testing really is one of the biggest roadblocks for families and friends of loved ones who might be struggling in school. And so let's talk about what special education testing is and what it's not, and what the purpose of and what the outcome might be and how to get that done. So who would be a candidate for special education testing? And I think sometimes we make it a little too complicated, and that's for our kids that are struggling. How is my child struggling? What are the ages that we're talking about? So in America, we talk about special education testing that can start as early as 2.5 years old. Special education in public schools or federally funded schools, so public schools, charter schools, starts at 2.5 and goes all the way up to kids and individuals who are 22 years old. And so a lot of people think about kids struggling that might need special education if they're struggling with academics, and that's not solely the area that we look at when we test. We certainly look at that area, but let's talk about all the areas that you might be looking at. Maybe it's your kiddo, maybe it's your niece or your nephew, maybe you have a daycare, maybe you see kiddos at church, maybe you just see kids in the community and you notice a kiddo or one of your kiddos just doesn't seem in the normed and average range in certain areas. So let's talk about what those areas would be. One is emotionality. And a lot of times, especially for new parents, new guardians, new adoptive parents or foster parents, if it's your first child and your first kiddo, maybe we don't know what the normed and average range is. And certainly kids mature and develop at different rates, but we're talking about a definite difference. And so emotionality. And so a lot of times we just say, oh, that's the 2s, or that's the 7s, or that's 5th graders, or that's junior high. And we don't want to do that. We want to really look at it to see if there's an area of need. So emotionality, how does your child respond to what we call normal circumstances, expected circumstances? Do they not respond? Is there no emotionality? Do they respond correctly to danger? Do they respond correctly to pain? Are they able to communicate when they have a need, right? Next is functional needs. Are they able to put on their little socks and shoes at the same rate as other kiddos their age? Are they able to, what we call, don and doff their clothing, which is put it on and put it off the same way other 3-year-olds do, or other 7-year-olds, or other 10-year-olds? Are they able to feed themselves? Do they struggle with, maybe we have kiddos that like pocket food or eat so fast that they choke or they gasp? And so any of those needs, those functional needs, we would look at. The way they walk, when they ambulate, do they struggle with tone and staying upright? Do some kiddos, we would say, if there's a wall to bump into, they're going to bump into it. And some of that is just clumsiness, and some of that is a real functional need. What is their vision? What is their hearing? Any of those needs. Physical needs. Do they have medical conditions? Do they have conditions that rise to the level of needing a medical team to take care of them? medical intervention, or even machines or adaptive or assistive technology equipment in their daily life. Language or communication. I think this is one of, and I think Alicia would agree, one of the areas that we kind of wait, right? And they're going to talk. And really, and you can look it up, you can look up 2-year-olds all the way up to any age, the amount of words a student should have. So for instance, and this is a guesstimate, don't quote me on it, but 2-year-olds should have about 200 words. They should have about 200 words. 2 to 3-year-olds should have about 200 to 250 words. They don't need to be talking in sentences. And a lot of times as moms and dads and caregivers, we answer for kiddos, right? Or we know what they want. They're just quiet. They're shy. And those things actually might be true. But if they're not in those normed and average ranges of what they should be doing in talking, functional, walking, all of those things, we want to look at if there's an area of need as it relates to that area. Academics, which would be pretty easy to understand if you're in school, or earlier we call that cognition, your ability to cognitively understand request demands as it relates to correspondence. And so we want to look at that. Are those kiddos doing the same thing that other 2-year-olds are doing? Are they doing the same thing as it relates to play? Do your kiddos play independently? Do they play with other kids? Do they join other kids when they play? Do they do side-by-side play? Or do they take their stuff and walk away? And so those are areas of need. And really just kind of for, young parents and kiddos, have they hit their milestones, right? And so we can start special education in America as early as 3 years old. And that would be the day they turn 3. So let's say that your kiddo turns 3 November 1st. Well, they could start special education that day. So you don't have to wait till the next year to start special education. So just like any area of need that your kiddo might have, if we need to intervene, we want to do it as quickly as possible. And we certainly want to err on the side of addressing it versus not addressing it. The saddest thing that I see when I work with families and our team work with families is regret. And there's no charge for special education testing in America. And so there's no point of putting it off. Testing does one of two things. It does one of two things. It identifies or eliminates. And we want both of those, right? It identifies something or eliminates something. So if your kiddo had a fever on Thursday, today's Thursday, we might wait till tomorrow, but we're probably going to get them in to a pediatrician tomorrow, right? We're not going to wait till Monday. That's way too long to wait in the medical world. And I always say that you need to think of special education with the same urgency that you think of as a medical intervention, because children do not get, nor do parents get, time back. Okay. So when we're thinking that a child might have an area of need that might be an area of need related to special education, what does that mean? So in America, we have a law called Child Find, and it's a federal law started in December 1975. It was originally called the Educating All Handicapped Children Act, and it switched to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act in 1990. And the premise and the foundation of this law, IDEA, is that we have a responsibility, a duty, and an onus that the local education agency, which is just a fancy word for your school, is to identify, locate, and evaluate children with suspected disabilities and test them for special education and or related services. And so I want to park there for just a second. It doesn't say with confirmed disabilities or for sure. And I think parents get in a loop of, I think my kid is struggling or might be struggling. So they go out to their pediatrician, or they go for a referral for OT, or they go and spend thousands of dollars. We've seen, our team has seen families come in and have spent almost 5 figures on testing for a kiddo. That is not a requirement, and that's not necessary. And we're certainly happy if you're able to do that. but it simply says in the law that we test kiddos with suspected disabilities who may be in need of special education and related services. So, okay, Karen, so I think my kiddo is struggling. I think that they're not in the normed and average range in one of those areas that you talked about. So how do I request that? So how do I request that if my kid's not even in school? He's just at home, or he's 4 and he goes to daycare and he has a great time at daycare. He's just behind. He's 4.5. He's not potty trained. He barely talks, but he's a happy little kiddo, right? But he's behind in areas, right? So how do I reach out to the school? Well, you want to reach out to the school and find out who is the special education director for your city, county, or school district. Who is the special education director? And I would reach out to them and say, could you please give me the contact information to get a formal request for my child for special education testing? So let's say you live across the street from Elm Elementary School. That school, even if you had their email, might not be the school that does the testing for kids that aren't already in school. So I would reach out to the executive director of special education and get that contact information. And if you don't have that, go ahead and reach out to the principal at the closest school to you. They should be able to direct you. I would include as many people as I know in the email, and let me craft the email for you. I know that lots of trainings make it very serious, and they have these letters that have in the beginning 500 pieces of code, thus saith. We're not kidding. And you don't need to do all of that. It's a very simple request. It's very important, though, that your request, although it be simple, is in writing. And here's what I want you to put in the email. Dear school district, dear staff, dear team, this is Karen Mayer Cunningham. This is my formal request for Billy Cunningham to have special education testing. Areas of suspected disability are learning, attention, behavior, and language, or any combination of those. We look forward to coming in and signing notice and consent. Period. And send it. Why is that important, Karen? My husband works at the school. My Aunt Myrtle works at the school. I could just tell her when I see her at the library. You could, but we want things to be in writing so that it sets up timelines. Because sometimes when people know people at the school, and we usually always do, is that somebody tells somebody, and yes, they're going to get it done, and it gets passed around, it doesn't get started. So we need to get those steps started. And the way you start that in a legal process is by writing. The school has options when you send in that request for testing for special education. By law, they have to respond to your written request within 15 calendar days. So if you send it April 1st, by April 16th, they have to respond to you. And the response has to be one of two things. Yes, we're going to grant your request for special education. Or 2, we're going to deny your request for special education. So for purposes of today, we're going to assume all good things that they're going to grant your request because you suspect a disability and a need for special education or related services. So when they do that, then I'm good to go, Karen. They're just going to do it. What happens next? So let's talk about what happens next if you're not in school yet, and if you already are in school, or if you're school age, but you're not in public school. Okay. So number one, I'm not in school. We have a child that's not kindergarten age yet. So you would ask for testing, and you would need to make your child available to the district and the multidisciplinary team to test in the areas that are suspected. And we'll talk about those 8 areas that we're going to test for. If your child is school age and they're in private school or they're homeschooled, one of 2 different things will happen. So if you're homeschooled, then the school district that you live in will do the testing. Again, you have to make your student available to those multidisciplinary team members to do the testing. If your child is in private school, but the private school is zoned in another county or school district, then that county or school district will do the special education testing. So we live in a little tiny city called Houston, which has about 7.5 million people, and we have countless school districts. And then some folks have their kids in private school in the middle of Houston, and they take them there on their way to work and pick them up afterwards. And so sometimes they're in a different district than their zone too. So again, if you're in private school, the private school district, the private school, wherever that address is, that school district has a responsibility to do the testing for special education and related services. And if your child is already in school, then of course that testing will happen during the instructional day in the time period allotted. Okay. So testing takes a while. It doesn't happen in and out. We want the multidisciplinary team members to take the time they need to do a thorough evaluation and do it with fidelity. And so in America, depending on where you live, depending if it's new, initial, reevaluation, the range is between 30 and 60 school days, 30 and 60 school days to complete the totality of that evaluation. And so those are school days. So that's 5 out of 7 days. So in Texas, it's 45 days. So you have to remember that would be 9 weeks. That's 25% of the school year. So there's no need to wait. If you suspect something, go ahead and get this started now. So when I ask for testing, I'm going to be very clear when I go in and sign notice and consent. And when I say clear, I mean clear, because I assume that we're always all on the same page, but you have to realize the person that you speak to about testing probably will not be the person who actually does the testing, right? So the person providing you notice and consent, they're providing you notification that we're notifying you that we're going to test your child for special education and related services. The consent is giving them consent to test your child for special education and related services. So what are the 8 areas that I'm going to ask for? I'm going to ask for 8 areas, and we're going to line them out for you so that you have them. If you are able to, I would go ahead and email this list ahead of time and say, hey, Alicia, I know I'm meeting with you Thursday on the 12th to sign notice and consent for my child to have special education testing. These are the 8 areas that I'm asking for, and then any details around that. Again, the more that you can have it in writing and ahead of time, the better. Plus, it also gives you a template to print out for yourself when you go to the meeting, and then they can have that paperwork ready ahead of time as well. So what are the 8 areas when we're asking for initial testing for special education? Number 1, you're going to ask for formal speech and language evaluation to include pragmatics. Formal speech and language evaluation to include pragmatics. So there are 9 areas in speech that you would possibly meet eligibility for and have a need for speech and language services from an SLP. We won't go over all those today, but the reason that you want to add pragmatic is often by certain districts or cities, and we don't put in pragmatic unless we believe or have heard that there's a suspicion of a specific eligibility called autism. And so while I understand that, pragmatic is a deficit in social language and appropriate responses and reciprocity. You could have a pragmatic eligibility and not have autism. And so it's very important when you ask for that speech and language evaluation that you say a formal speech and language evaluation to include pragmatic. That's number 1. Number 2, medical physical. Number 2, medical physical. So what are those things going on with my kiddo that are medical? Does he have seizures? Does he have a CPAP machine? Does he have, is he diabetic? Is there something that rises to the level of having a medical team, medical protocols, and medical medicines that he takes to intervene for those areas of need? You want testing in that area, and you certainly want to have a provision of that information to the team so that they know the kind of kiddo that they're testing. So let's say that your kiddo takes a lot of medicine for a medical condition. Well, then they might know that that kiddo needs extra hydration during the day. Also, they would need that extra hydration during the testing. If your child was diabetic, it would be important to know that. Be important to know that we test him and check his levels before we start to do testing. Is he within the correct range? Does he have to be dosed? Does he need a snack? so that his levels can be in the average range when we test him in all areas for special education and related services. And physical needs. Does your child have physical needs as it relates to standing or sitting or reaching or walking or feeding or any of those needs that are physical needs? You want to identify those and share those with a committee. So if there's a need for testing, we do that as well. Number three, sociological. We really have seen the impact of sociological in this, this virtual world that we live in now, right? Since the pandemic, we've really exposed the impact of things that impact kiddos in school that don't happen during the instructional day. What are some of those things that are sociological, Karen? So it could be, and it's things that impact kiddos that may not impact adults, right? Maybe your child is home and the last sibling has moved out and now they're the only child at home. Maybe dad works from home now and that's causing your child anxiety. Maybe your child doesn't understand that dad has a job, but he works from home. Since COVID, a lot of families have moved in together, right? That's a new dynamic that didn't exist before, right? And maybe a child has lost a pet. These things that may or may not impact adults the same way can greatly impact students. So we want to really explore and look at all of those areas of sociological. Additionally, as are in many families, over 50% of families in America are blended or single persons raising a child or foster children or surrogate parents or adoptive parents. You also want to open that up and look at, it's kind of our best guess, but look at those things that, again, may impact a student and how they perform at school. Number four, a formal psychological evaluation or emotional behavior evaluation. Depending on where you live in the United States, we would call them a psychological evaluation or emotional behavior. I think this is one of the evaluations that's really easily just swept over. We just don't do that. We say things to the parents like, so Alicia, has your child been to the office? And are they have any behavior needs? And immediately, if you say that to a parent, they think, was my child misbehaving? And so we all have behaviors. One of my behaviors is I talk with my hands, right? If you made me hold my hands down, I probably wouldn't be able to talk as much. That's a behavior. It doesn't mean I'm misbehaving. So we want to look at a child's behaviors. Are those behaviors in circumstances that existed in school and sometimes at home in the average range? Additionally, some of those areas that we might test for in formal psychological or emotional behavioral would be a functional behavior assessment. So let's say that the acuity of your child's behaviors is hard to be addressed or handled by the general ed teacher, and it's impacting their learning or the learning of others, then we might request a functional behavior assessment. And that's simply we're trying to figure out what is the root cause of these behaviors and how can we address them. Rating scales. We want rating scales from everybody: the parent, the parents, the grandparent, the daycare workers, the students' rating scale. Students are very self-aware. 2 or more teacher rating scales. If it's appropriate, then we'll have a student interview, parent interviews. In consideration for psych services, psychological services can be provided to any student at any campus in America, whether you're gen ed, 504, or special education. And based on the acuity of their emotional dysregulation, there might even be a consideration of counseling as a related service evaluation. So that's number 4. Number 5, formal cognitive or IQ evaluation. And so we want to make sure that when we ask for a cognitive evaluation or IQ evaluation, that we ask for it in all 7 Gs, And so your Gs are your brain skills, and the person's doing the evaluation will know what those are. A lot of testing only tests for 4 or 5 cognitive areas, and those are great. But when we don't test in all 7, we might be overlooking one of the other areas of a specific learning disability. So certainly when you ask for cognition, ask for all 7 Gs. Number 6, we're going to ask for formal adaptive behavior. Formal adaptive behavior, that simply means how much are my adaptive skills like those of other people in my age range. So does your 7-year-old play on the equipment in the playground the same way other kiddos do? Do they walk the same way? Is their communication at the same level? Is their independent play the same level? Is their cognition the same level? Those sorts of domains they're going to look at. Number 7 is formal achievement. Formal achievement. So we had formal IQ and cognition, right? That's your brain skills. I call it kind of how you're cooked, how your brain works and holds and manipulates and stores information. Achievement is kind of what I can get out of my brain, right? And so achievement, we're going to do 5 areas. We're going to do reading, math, written expression. Those 3 are standard, but I'm also going to ask for listening comprehension and oral expression. It's very important that you indicate all 5 of these. Again, those last 2, listening comprehension and oral expression, may tease out an area of a specific learning disability that wouldn't be found had we not done that testing. And then number 8 is related and or instructional services. So almost everywhere we call them related services, but in the great state of Texas, we call some of them instructional services. These are additional services or therapies delivered on top of special education minutes in an instructional day. I'm going to read you a few of them. They're not a exhaustive list, but this might give you some ideas of what they are. So occupational therapy in written expression or fine motor, occupational therapy and sensory, speech therapy services, physical therapy services, adaptive physical education services. So if other 8-year-olds can throw a ball 15 feet, can your child throw a ball overhead 15 feet? Those sorts of things as it relates to physical education. And that can start as early as 5, because physical education, PE, is a requirement in kindergarten. Counseling is a related service. It's an amazing product, service if your child needs it. I call it HR at work. It gives that child the ability to have one-on-one counseling with somebody who has a licensure or certification to deliver that, to talk about the emotionality they have around school. There's a thing that I call the minivan door syndrome. As moms and dads, we open the minivan door and our kiddo gets in and we say this to them: "How was your day?" Right? And what do they all say? "Fine." Right? What do you mean by that? And kiddos, just like adults, have emotions at school that sometimes rise to the level of needing counseling. Again, we have one thing to do in special education, and that's to teach a child strategies to self-manage their disability. And sometimes those strategies need to be taught around emotional needs. Next, music therapy. Music therapy is an amazing related service. And it has nothing to do with whether or not your kids like music or don't like music, or if they're trying out for America's Got Talent. Music therapy simply means that we've found that some data supports that for some people, when you add music to a non-preferred task, we get more gains on that. So, if I'm having to clean my house Saturday, I would much rather be doing that while listening to music than not. And there are kids that love music, and when we add music in, there's no more gains, and vice versa. So that's certainly a therapy available to you if they meet eligibility. Next are DHH itinerant services. That would be for a student who is identified as deaf and hard of hearing. Though deaf and hard of hearing itinerant service provider would provide those services to that student. An intervener is for a student who meets eligibility of deaf blindness. And they work with the totality of the team to make sure that the education, the educational product, the academic production that we put before them, and the supports and services and visual supports and tactile aids are appropriate for that student. Vision services, that's for a student who has blind or visually impaired. Again, that's to Braille, Nemeth Math, tactile aids, visual aids, all of those sorts of things. Feeding therapy, maybe you have a child that has feeding issues and we've asked for a dysphagia evaluation, then they might meet eligibility for feeding therapy at school. Orientation and mobility, those are students who are blind, visually impaired, or deafblind and need orientation and mobility to learn how to orient and move throughout their area when they are at school environment. Next, assistive technology and communication. We have so much assistive technology now as it relates to communication, whether it's low tech in a core board or high tech in a static communication system, so kiddos can bridge that gap of their language deficits. Assistive technology and written expression, of course, we all use that every day. We all take our cell phone and fire off a message or use that to send a message. And so that just is getting your thoughts down on a device, a piece of paper, and sending them. Parent training and counseling is one of the original related services, and that is for parents, guardians, surrogate parents that have a child with a disability, and they actually receive training and counseling, in-home training, and parent training. And so again, there's other related services and instructional services that you could be provided, but those are the evaluations. So we sign notice and consent, we get all of this down on paper, we give consent, and the school district starts the testing. What happens when the testing is done? So when the testing is done, one of three outcomes are going to occur. One, we're going to get the testing back, and it's going to say that your student does not have a disability that needs extra help at school. Number two, your student has a disability and needs some extra help at school called a 504, where they can receive accommodations and maybe some behavioral support. Or number three, that they have a disability and they are in need of special education and related services. And so those outcomes will then drive an IEP meeting or a 504 meeting or a meeting that says he doesn't meet eligibility so that we can begin services. And so, and we have other trainings on other outcomes. What we want you to do is we want you to not wait. There's a great thing in humans called a knower. Like, we know when something's not right. And so if you suspect that something is not right or something's off or just not quite in the normed and average range, please reach out to your public school. That is what they're there for. And you don't have to wait. It doesn't matter if we've had a natural disaster, if we are on, virtual or at school. These are services and supports that have always been in place since 1975. There's no delay for them, but you have to ask in writing. You want to get an answer to your concerns, and that's what special education and related service testing does. And remember, when we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody. So if there's anything that we can do to help you, please don't hesitate to let us know. You can always reach out to us for more help or support in this area at advocate@specialeducationacademy.com. And so, Alicia, if we have friends that have questions, or I know that you have people that have sent in questions ahead of time, or you've walked with people that have struggled with testing, we are happy to answer those questions.
Yeah, so I have one. They submitted ahead of time. They had a meeting at the end of last year, and they presented their, what their son was struggling in. They had emails from teachers from the past 3 years that said his struggles, and they were told by the IEP coordinator that he didn't think there was a learning disability, so they think he should just be on a 504. Is that correct?
So good news is we don't do any thinking. Thinking is not an evaluation. I'm just thinking of somebody's name that just flashed before me. I wonder what I'll be thinking. So we don't go on somebody's thinking. We test, right? Because testing, again, does one of two things. It identifies or eliminates. And even if he thinks the student needs a 504, whether you're looking at 504 or special education, both of those rise to the level of an evaluation. So when we're working with families, we always say test for special education. I would rather test here and the need be here than test here and then you missed that need. So I certainly appreciate that person's assumption, but that's what it is. Additionally, if somebody is going to deny you testing, the school district, just like you requested in writing, they have an onus, a duty, and responsibility to reply with their denial in a prior written notice, a PWN, and that has 7 components that must be met under Part B of the Individuals with Disability Education Act. A lot of parents are just really kind of too close to the school district. We go to church together, we're in baseball together. I saw you at the swim park together, and we'll just go, hey, Alicia, everything's going great. We'll see you next year. And we have this very familiar communication. And while there may not be anything wrong with that, there may not be anything right with that. I would rather have the multidisciplinary team do the testing, and I be wrong about it, and then we can move on with different supports for my kiddo.
Perfect. And then April said, if you've already requested and been denied, when can you ask again?
You can ask again the next day. So I would say, first of all, April, did you get that prior written notice? Does it meet all 7 component requirements under Part B of IDEA? Almost always, April, this is what it usually says. Hey, dear April, listen, he's doing great. He's got good grades and he hasn't been to the office. Oh, that's not the requirements of a prior written notice. And we have trainings on these. Alicia, I know we have them on. I feel like we just finished one on Special Education Academy. And because you guys are on this training, certainly if you reach out to us at Advocate or Special Education Academy, we can get you a 2-week membership for free to the Academy. But we just finished a multi-week series on your procedural rights. And one of them was just on a prior written notice. It's so important that you know what your rights are, because unfortunately, sometimes people at school, they don't know what your legal rights are. Your legal rights exist in this little tiny book called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And unfortunately, you would be hard sell to find a copy of this at your local school district. It's unfortunate, but they may not know all of your legal rights, and we certainly want them protected here at Special Education Academy.
Okay, thank you. And then Terry said, if someone asks verbally and does not send a request in writing, does the timeline still begin with the date of the oral request? Sometimes a parent says they want the eval and though told to put it in writing, they never submit the written request.
Right. So I'm a certified mediator for the family courts. I'm allowed, one of a handful of states where I'm allowed to represent families in due process hearings, even though I'm not a litigator. And I think, as we all know, under the law, it's either written down. We watch Judge Judy, right? It's either written down and it happened, or it's not written down and it didn't happen. So I always, even for my friends that work at the school and can literally walk across the hall to Miss Bobby Joe and get it done, I want it in writing so that there's no, I didn't know, I forgot, because we're all humans. I forget stuff all the time. It needs to be in writing. The only legal requirement and protection you're going to have is if you put it in writing. If you did not put it in writing, it didn't happen.
Okay, perfect. And then someone said, I know you said you're in Texas. Do you represent families in other states?
I do. I just got a thank you note from Kodiak, Alaska. I almost put it in my phone. Alicia, we'll have to remember to do that. I'm like, how far away is your furthest away client? How long would the drive be? It would be like, we would have to stop at Buc-ee's, right, Alicia? We'd have to get some snacks.
A lot of Buc-ee snacks.
A lot of Buc-ee snacks. So yes, I've got clients all over America. I have a client that just moved to Germany. I have clients all over the world. But yes, we have all of our team members have clients everywhere. And all IEP meetings now happen over this beautiful thing called Zoom with an Ethernet cord, so we can serve you whatever state you live in.
Perfect. And this one's a really good question. My child qualified, but I didn't agree with the eligibility that he qualified under. Would you take the IEP so he can get services, or would you argue that they're misdiagnosing them? Sorry.
Yeah. So, for initial provision of services, I'd take it. And then I would request an IEE, an independent educational evaluation. That's one of your procedural rights. So let's say that, we test Alicia's cousin and they say that she has dyslexia and an SLD in reading fluency. And I think that she has dyslexia, reading fluency, and ADHD. So I'm not going to die on that rock. I want to start services, right? Because while we're disagreeing as an adult, Alicia's niece needs these services. So I'll take the services now, and I'll request via the school district an independent educational evaluation at the expense of the district. And an outside evaluator comes in and does like testing to either confirm the district's findings or refute them, right? And so I certainly want services to start. I don't want to argue over something and they get no services, because a child, the longer we wait, a child is teaching themselves strategies. to compensate for their disability that it is not going to serve them long term.
Perfect. And then the last question that I see, which we all know what happens when I say that. But the last question that I see is, it's a little lengthy, sorry. So I went to an IEP meeting and I didn't feel like I was given the opportunity to fully express my parent concerns. What can I do when I'm just talked over and I feel like nobody hears me?
Sure. Well, first, I'm sorry that happened. It's unfortunately not unusual. So what I recommend to people that we represent, or even if I'm going in with them, I have parent concerns pre-populated. That way, as a representative, I'm conveying those concerns correctly. I'll sometimes read those parent concerns, provide them to the school district ahead of time. If for some reason you got in the meeting, unfortunately, and what you said happened, then I will reply back to them and say, I wasn't able to fully express the totality of my parent concerns. I have typed them out here. Please attach them to my student's IEP.
Okay, well, that's all the questions that we have. Thank you so much.
Thanks, you guys. If you need anything, let us know. Just reach out to us at Advocate at Special Education Academy, and we will see you guys in the next training. Hit subscribe, share this with a friend, and you know what? Meet me back here every single week. We're not just talking about change, we're making it. Because when you know better, you do better. And when we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody.